I would like to welcome you all and thank you for joining us for what promises to be a very special event. I'm Kerri Johnson, professor and chair of the Department of Communication here at UCLA. As we begin this evening's event, I'd like to thank Matt, Nancy, and Barry Sanders for making this evening possible. Thank you for your vision and your support for tonight's program. More broadly, it's such a pleasure for me to know that we have so many familiar faces in the audience tonight. We're joined this evening by many of our department's own faculty members, along with the faculty and administration from across campus. We're also joined by many friends and alumni of the communication department, both who are still on campus and off. These dedicated and talented alumni include several members of our department's inaugural Board of Visitors here with us tonight: Phil Hong, Chip McLean, Alan Naira, and Karen Wolfen. Thank you for your generous support to the department. I'd like to briefly contextualize this evening's event and its focus. The field of communication aims to understand how information is sent and received through multiple channels. The groundbreaking research of our faculty has led to numerous discoveries. For example, we now know how a baby's babbling elicits responses from a caregiver, how individuals automatically coordinate their movements and eye gaze and vocalizations during interactions, and how the rapidly evolving computational aspects of our communication on those little devices that you all have tucked in a pocket someplace fundamentally change our social lives, and even what happens when politicians attack. To be sure, these insights are key to the discipline of communication. Tonight, however, our focus is on nonverbal communication, a mode of communication that pervades our daily lives. Whether it's a glance across a room, the tone of another person's laugh, or a glimpse of somebody's body in motion, nonverbal communication is powerful. So powerful, in fact, that it is central to the artist's communication with their audience. Tonight's lecture celebrates the profound ways that the arts communicate with us via nonverbal means, moving us, inspiring us, and sometimes challenging us. Thank you for joining us tonight, and I'd like to introduce the Dean of the Social Sciences, Darnell Hunt.
Thank you, Kerri, and welcome everyone. I would like to also acknowledge the Sanders family, Matt, Nancy, and Barry, for making this event possible through their gift to the UCLA Department of Communication. It is an exciting time for the Communication Department at UCLA. As one of the most competitive majors in the social sciences, the department has been a magnet for some of the best students at UCLA. And its faculty continues to produce cutting-edge research, always staying at the forefront of communication theory. Here at UCLA, we believe strongly in our public mission. And as dean, I see civic engagement as integral to the work of the Division of Social Sciences. To not only be the best public research university in the nation, but to leverage the outstanding research of our faculty and students to improve and enrich the lives of Angelenos in our wider community. Today's lecture is the embodiment of civic engagement and purpose, which in a diverse and multicultural city such as Los Angeles is needed now more than ever. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our distinguished lecturer for tonight. Gustavo Dudamel is the music and artistic director of the Los Angeles Philharmonic and the Walt and Lilly Disney Chair. In addition, he serves as the music and artistic director for the Simón Bolívar Symphony Orchestra of Venezuela. Mr. Dudamel's prowess and commitment as a conductor and civic leader cannot be overstated, and it is my great pleasure to welcome him to the stage.
Good evening. I will start, say that it's a huge honor to be here, and also to forgive my English. I will be talking in English, but of course, thinking in Spanish. When I step onto the stage in a faraway land with an orchestra I have never met, who doesn't speak English or Spanish, I enter fearlessly. I'm confident that we have at least two languages in common. First, of course, is music. My life mantra is that music unites, and I know that wherever we come from, be us paupers or kings, from the north or the south, no matter the color of our skin, our faith, or native tongue, we will strive towards common goals and make beautiful and transcendent music together. The second language we have in common is body language, or what we refer to as nonverbal communication. I know the orchestra and I won't be building the Tower of Babel. I am confident that no matter what the obvious language or cultural barriers, the musicians and I will share an intimate dialogue on a stage together. Within the orchestra, musicians exchange all kinds of nonverbal cues and signals, passing each other's crucial information to play, breathe, and phrase together. At the same time, with a wink, a nod, a snap of the baton, and a sweeping hand, the conductor will send a very clear message to the entire orchestra, uniting the individual musicians' voices in collective harmony. I don't say this out of arrogance, but instead out of experience. I know that human beings in general, and musicians in particular, have a very keen sense of communication that transcends the limits of verbal speech. I have experienced this elevated sense of awareness since I was a young child, and I see it in every accomplished musician I have ever encountered. At the same time, there are very learned scholars who know more about music history and can reproduce entire compositions from memory, but without the ability to physically convey the content of the music, even the most prodigious scholars can fall short. The magic ingredient is the ability to at once read others and to convey one's own deepest thoughts, all without words. I have been asked if this is something I learned or something I discovered naturally. To me, the intuitive aspect of nonverbal communication comes from my duende. While duende is a Spanish term, many cultures have them. They are otherwise known as goblins, pixies, elves, or leprechauns. They are little creatures that attach themselves to an individual and perform small feats of magic and present special gifts and powers to their host. Federico Garcia Lorca first developed the concept of duende, who helps artists create and communicate memorable, spine-chilling art. The offerings of the duende can be enhanced, refined, and improved, but only if they exist in the first place. It is like athletic talent or the ability to play an instrument. The muscles and reflexes must be trained. If you don't develop the natural talent, one will never reach one's full potential. My duende gave me the power to listen without words and speak without language, to receive information and express information, input and output like an electric current, incredibly quick. Without that bit of magic and generosity, it is unlikely I will be here before you this evening. So, when I say my prayers, I always include my duende who has shared this special gift. I have also learned that while all cultures express themselves non-verbally, some use it to greater extent than others. There are academic studies that recognize that the indigenous people of the Americas actually use these skills of awareness and physical reflex more effectively than most other people. So clearly, I have my ancestors to thank for my duende that sits in my shoulder and lets me communicate without words. The nonverbal skills of the indigenous people of the Americas were considered extremely well-honed, sophisticated. Not surprisingly, many of these skills crucial to the successful conducting were highly valued in these cultures. Let me point out some of them. First is a respect for personal differences. In today's society, differences often result in polarization. In native people, they were based on mutual respect. They thought that staying out of others' affairs was valued as were keeping their opinion to themselves. Clearly, this was well before Facebook and Twitter came along. This is so crucial in an orchestra where we have people from all walks of life. Silence was valued. Many misread silence for indifference, yet nothing could be further from the truth. In their culture, it was a deeply embedded form of personal etiquette. Listening was equally valuable to talking. I love when my musicians listen. In Native American life, the virtue of patience was based on the belief that all things unfold on time. Music is like that. One must immerse oneself until it clicks in your head, and there is a deeper, more profound understanding of the message that goes far beyond the notes on the page. In these cultures, work was not held to a rigid schedule, but instead there was an ethic that it is always direct to a distinct purpose and gets done when it needs to be done. Let's be honest, orchestras run on schedules. But the purposeful aspects of this lesson are not lost on me or the musicians I work with. We never forget our higher purpose, and we do what needs to be done when it needs to be done, except when the union rules dictate otherwise. Yeah, right. It's always coming, you know. I always watch my watch, and it's like 1 minute before, and I'm like shaking all the time, waiting for my dear Jeff to come and say, Maestro. Well, but that is part of the rules. Mutualism permeated every aspect of their lives. The question was always, what is the greater good? That is so crucial in music. Unlike the contemporary American ideal of competition, cohesiveness must reign. But I always confess, sometimes as the conductor, I have to let mutualism fall by the wayside and create the result I desire. But even at these moments, I recognize that I'm nothing without my musicians. Waving a baton without an orchestra is an exercise in futility. Communication, both verbal and nonverbal, was encouraged only if it was purposeful. Small talk, chit-chat, gossip, these things were distractions and discouraged. It teaches both intent and sparsity of communication, both crucial to the work I do and the results I seek from my players. Observation and demonstration, as opposed to lecturing, was the preferred teaching method. And when talk is required, it is usually in the form of storytelling and metaphors. This can be most productive in the orchestral setting. I already mentioned that the cultures believe that things would happen in their own time. Related to this is an orientation to the present. It is so far too easy to live in the past or worry about the future. But this was viewed as distracting and non-productive. As musicians, we deal with the task at hand and let go of what happened before or what might happen in the future. As my mentor, Maestro José Antonio Abreu, says, time is in the air. You just have to grab it and bring it to the music. The orientation of these people was holistic, which is the perfect metaphor for an orchestra. It is not the piccolo or the violin or the French horn. It is the gestalt of the whole that must be paramount in every player's mind. Finally, and maybe the most important of these values, is spirituality. To all conductors, music is holy, and Beethoven, Mozart, Bach, Adams are God, because they bring enthusiasm to their souls. As we know, the Greek word enthusiasm means to have the gods inside of you. This is not a job, it is a calling. Music is as important as air, water, and food to me. If it is not, then perhaps you are in the wrong profession. A lot of things in my life became clear to me when I realized I was genetically predisposed to the work I do. Perhaps at the time I didn't always understand my calling or my skills that led me to this place in my life. But looking back, it makes a lot more sense to me, knowing that these things were in my blood, embedded in my DNA. So, how does this play out in my professional life? Well, during rehearsal, I certainly have my nonverbal tools, but I can also speak to the orchestra to articulate my musical wishes. And this is very important in the initial phases to provide context for our shared interpretation. Once the concert begins, however, I can only rely on the precision of my physical gestures in leading the orchestra and the power to instantaneously respond to the nonverbal information being exchanged by the musicians in order to achieve our common goal. You would think conducting a piece of music is very rote. The notes are on the page and the musicians play them. But that is far from the reality. It's more like a soccer game. I'm the coach and I have a plan and a strategy. But like a soccer game, every match has its own organic ebb and flow. Things change and adjustments must be made continuously. It is much more exciting and dynamic than most people imagine. If I didn't have my nonverbal skills, without the ability to respond to the unique demands of the movement, with clarity and assurance, more often than not, the musical results would be disastrous. While there are some central elements or a lexicon of gestures common to all conductors. For example, 1, 2, 3, 4. This means 4. 1, 2, 3. Like a valse, this means 3. This means forte. This means soft. This short, this long, whatever. Each develops his or her own method. Indeed, his own choreography of conducting that represents the specific dynamic of the piece being played, the experience and tradition of the orchestra being conducted, the unique acoustic or atmospheric demand of the moment, and an expression of personal style. As a young man learning conducting, Maestro Abreu took me to ballet rehearsals to study and would ask, can you see the tempi in the body? Can you see the harmony in the arms? Can you see the phrasing in the complete body? I have studied many other conductors in person and on film, and I'm awed that the range of stylistic possibilities. The legendary Herbert von Karajan, for example, developed a technique of conducting with his eyes closed. Communication with his orchestra, therefore, was not only non-verbal, but also essentially non-visual. He felt that by shutting his optical sense, it helped hide his ability to hear and respond to the audible subtleties around him. It probably also meant to the musicians in performance experience the greater need to exchange greater non-verbal information between each other to compensate for the conductor literally driving blind. Meanwhile, the lower half of Karajan's body hardly moved, while his arms and hands did all the work with great elegance and economy. This is often attributed to the aggressive regimen of yoga and meditation that were an integral part of Karajan's musical and mental preparation. It was a very personal approach, in many ways inimitable and unique to its time, but obviously enormously successful, as shown by Karajan's enduring status as a global musical icon. On the other hand, we have Leonard Bernstein, who, like his hero, Gustav Mahler, was known for his exuberant gestures. Whereas Karajan was all about control, with Bernstein you saw energy, joy, passion, and sometimes even an earthquake. Yet Bernstein knew exactly what he was doing, and occasionally he would reduce his dramatic gesture to the tiniest of inflection, letting minor facial expressions and nuances do all the musical talking. This moment, when Bernstein was at his least flamboyant, were some of his most shocking, as his deliberate defiance of expectation intensifies the sense of dramatic suspense. As Bernstein himself described it, the conductor must not only make his orchestra play, he must make them want to play. He must exalt them, lift them, start their adrenaline pouring, either by pleading or demanding or raging. It doesn't matter. It is not so much imposing his will on them like a dictator. It is more like projecting his feelings around them. It doesn't really matter how well you move with your hands. It should be in your face. It should be in your expression. Another example would be my late great friend and mentor, Claudio Abbado, who had the most eloquent hands of any conductor, but who understood his purpose as not to draw attention to himself, but to encourage the musicians of the orchestra to listen and respond to each other as if playing chamber music. This too was a very individual approach. Carlos Kleiber also comes to mind. His exhaustive preparation and legendary perfectionism was prelude to a non-verbal style which was cunningly effective and elegantly restrained, yet always charged with a kind of ferocious energy. I think masters like Karajan and Bernstein, in their individual ways, always have strategies worked out ahead of time. Not only their musical conceptions, but also the physical expressions of their intentions were calculated for greatest theatrical effect. In that sense, I feel closer to Kleiber, preferring to let the piece and the moment dictate my movements, and to use the energy of the moment to unlock more possibilities and expressive tools. When I conduct, my goal is not a technical one. Getting all the notes right is the job of the players in front of me. My challenge is an emotional one, to see that the musicians are playing harmoniously with each other, that the interpretation is coherent, and that what we are collectively trying to express is reaching the audience and moving them. People come to a concert not just to listen, but to allow the music to take them on a journey. On the podium, I feel like I'm their guide, using all my non-verbal means to convey and reveal this wondrous path of discovery we can walk together. When I was much younger, conducting was all about how. How I'm going to do this, how will the orchestra respond, how will it sound? After more than a quarter of a century of conducting, the question that enters my mind before I perform a new piece is why? Why I'm doing this piece? Why I'm approaching this piece in this way? Why will the audience engage? It goes back to the spirituality and the godlessness of music. Audiences in Los Angeles have more access to the visual aspects of conducting than in most venues. At Walt Disney Concert Hall, there are some seats that actually face me, and the orchestra has their backs to the audience. And at the Hollywood Bowl, my conducting is projected on huge screens for all to see. This is not typical and offers special insight to our audience, who have proven themselves to be among the most sophisticated in the world. But let me be clear. The non-verbal communications we are discussing are for the orchestra. They are not done to entertain the audiences, although I certainly recognize that they might have that additional effect. In the end, it is not about my posture, it is not about my gestures, it is simply what we are expressing in that moment. That is the essence. Next time you are at a concert, I invite you to close your eyes, even if just for a moment, and just listen to the honesty, the composer, and the music. When I step onto the stage, no matter where in the world I am, no matter what else is going on in my life, I am my happiest. Because I always know that something extraordinary is about to happen. That sense of joy and anticipation is what I want audiences to feel. And the only tools I have are my movements and my music and my duende to take them there. Thank you.
Thank you. It is now my pleasure to welcome Benjamin Millepied, a world-renowned dancer, choreographer, and rising director, onto the stage to be in conversation with Gustavo Dudamel. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this, mind-blowing speech. I started to think about you, conducting these extraordinary pieces, listening to this world of sound, having to react from moment to moment. I mean, I was lucky enough to dance to live orchestra for almost 20 years, and I miss it. I mean, it's just the world of, to be so close to a world of sound like that, it's just such an extraordinary experience. And part of me also wanted to be a conductor to some extent. But I first want to ask you, how did it all begin? For me, music is the reason why I started dancing, and then very quickly, creatively, music made me see movement, and very early on, I started making dances. How did you go from becoming a musician to becoming a conductor? How did that happen?
Well, let me tell you also that I wanted to be a dancer, but I know that it's painful.
Very painful.
And it was beautiful because my maestro, José Antonio Abreu, as I told you, he took me to these rehearsals, and also we were watching a lot of videos of ballet. And even as a player, he was showing this video to the complete orchestra to understand phrasing, to understand tempi, to understand, the space. Because musically, sometimes, because we are sitting there and we move, space is a little bit, square. With ballet, you move around, the stage, and that embrace everything. And I remember, it started because, of course, I love music, my family, my father. I wanted to be a salsa player. And I finished conducting an orchestra. The real history, I will tell you which is, and is that I was conducting at home my little puppets, my toys. And that was one of my favorite things.
Oh, wow.
I was... the union, I had a union in my house. When my grandmother was moving my things, I was, no, you cannot move. Well, this is funny and it's beautiful. But then I got a baton and I was conducting, following,
right.
The recordings, blah, blah, blah. One day the conductor was late, I was playing the violin, and I went to the podium. And I started to imitate, the conductors in a funny way, in a very funny way. When in a moment I saw myself doing a rehearsal. And then the conductor that was late was standing there. I was like, oh my God. And he told me, no. You want to be my assistant conductor? So I was around 11 years old when that happened. And that's it. It was the beginning. But I think all musicians have that kind of, no desire, but, that kind of, I don't know, this attention to be a conductor. I think everybody. It's not difficult.
Sure. So there's this deep sort of love for music, this desire to conduct, and so this physicality that comes with it, desire to express. So, and you grew up in a country where dancing is part of universal language. Is there as you conducted more, you said you studied other conductors and how they express themselves to the orchestra, and is that something you practice? Like, for example, today I imagine today you study a score, you do it sitting down, but was there a point where you actually practiced my movements and so forth? Yeah.
I never practiced my movements, to be honest. Yeah. I always joke with the orchestra when I don't know to do something that is almost always, I said next day, I was just in my mirror, I was in front of my mirror, and I practiced and I have done my movement. But it's not true. I never practiced my movement. But when I started to study with Maestro José Antonio Abreu, God, this was one of the most intense moments of my life. I remember Maestro Abreu have a very special way to conduct. And he have a technique. So I have for hours my arms up in this way, in this way. And he said, for example, it was very elegant because he said like, normally we do a 4 like 1, 2, 3, 4 like that. But he was very balletistic. And he said, no. The 4th is an 8. And he was like 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. My God, it was like whoa. And I remember conducting for him without an orchestra, Mahler's first symphony. He was sitting there in his office. I was in front of him, and I was like, who is playing there? Well, this is strings. What they're playing? An A, harmonic. In which tessiture? Well, how many bars? 2. Who is coming? Oboe. No. You have to anticipate. It was like, conducting a symphony, saying everything that was happening, which is the dynamic piano, pianissimo, forte. It was kind of, and with all of that, he was, teaching my movements. It was very painful, Benjamin. You cannot imagine.
I can imagine.
Because it was kind of to be all day like this. And I was obsessed. I went, everywhere like that. and people will see me like, oh my God, what is this crazy guy doing? It was like that, but it was the best thing. I remember when I started to conduct, I was conducting with my arms here. It was very safe because here you rest your shoulders like. But in this way, it was very elegant. And when I saw ballet, for example, the movement, the use of the movement, and Maestro Abreu telling me about that 4 that was very balletistic, it changed my...
It opened things up.
Completely.
Yeah, it's interesting because, as I choreographed to music and I danced to maybe the greatest, choreographer, Balanchine, who really... his work was very sophisticated and knew when to do, less is more to some extent, when to let music shine and so forth. We're constantly trying to refine our movement to connect to music. I've been doing it in New York for weeks. So you were showing these movements that are, very much like the rhythm and the complexity. I can only imagine how, complex some of these scores are, but also like all of this expression. The movement has to be incredibly expressive to convey different emotions. Is this something that has developed over the years? Is there a larger range as you've had to encounter new repertory? And do you think that the range of expression of your body has evolved and changed over time?
Completely. I think the essence is exactly the same. The conception of what I do is exactly the same. But of course, with the experience and with the time and with the music that you conduct, it changed a lot. And for example, these weeks I'm doing Mozart. And in the next days, I will be doing Bohème. That is also another kind of reaction because symphonic music to conduct is different to be in a pit and conducting opera or ballet, the distance, the singing, everything. And I think all of that kind of things, the expression, it comes for all of these things that you live, that you have experience with. Of course, after, for example, I did opera, my way to conduct have become more lyrical. And that is why when I became music director of Los Angeles Philharmonic, my first proposal was to do the Mozart da Ponte cycle, the 3 operas. Because it was a way for the orchestra learn how to listen to the singing, because sometimes you do an accompaniment in Mozart or in an opera, but sometimes you don't know the sound of the voice or the text, what is happening. Here we will have two things about expression. For example, in opera, it's very clear because I'm dying, I'm dying, I'm dying. And of course, that thing, you know, it can be very clear. It's more, you know, these kind of things. But how you put that in an instrument? You kill your instrument? Mori, die. You don't do that, you know. So you have to create a kind of sound that connect with that. Because sometimes the thing is that we are living a world of a lot of routine. Sometimes we arrive to places where we listen the beautiful piece, and it's like, wow, where is the drama? Where is the expressivity? And sometimes it's because, you know, a lot of things. And that is why for me as an individual, as a conductor, was very important to share with my musicians that connection with the singing. The same with ballet. We are planning to do some things, but we have done, for example, when I did the Apollo,
yes,
it was very beautiful because the piece as a symphonic piece is very beautiful. As a classical music piece, because it's only strings, sorry, as a chamber music piece. But with the ballet, it becomes a different thing. And when the musicians see that, it changes completely.
Well, that's the rare example of a ballet that's a masterpiece. And in a way, you know, Balanchine used to say, you know, see the music and hear the dance. There's this amazing connection between the two, but that's incredibly rare. The first time I saw you conduct was Symphonie Fantastique, Berlioz. And I was just blown away. You conducted the whole thing without a score. And I want to ask you about that, because you were talking about, you know, Kerri conducting with the eyes closed, and the ability to walk on stage and have this entire score in your body, and no need for this, you know, to look down and have full concentration. Is that something that you feel, you know, gives you more freedom to not have the score when you can, with certain, you know, certain?
Look, in a way, yes, it gives me more freedom, but I will not say that it makes me a better conductor.
Right.
You know, there are great conductors that they conduct with the music there, with the score, and they do the most beautiful things. It's funny about the Symphonie Fantastique, because I do in a very crazy way. I take that piece as a theatrical piece, starting for the life of an artist, opium, you know, the effect of this artist dreaming on witches, on all of these beautiful things. I got mad about the piece. And I remember...
Is that information you share with all these images? You share that with your orchestra?
Completely. If I don't share, they will fire me in 1 second.
Yeah.
You know, they will say, oh my God, what a crazy man. But I remember Claudio Abbado. I was in Venezuela with him. And I told him, look, I would love to do one day Symphonie Fantastique. I have done the first movement in a master class in Argentina, and I would love to do. And he said, well, I'm doing. And he told me, you know, I'm listening this recording of Charles Monch, the French conductor. He was for many years conductor of the Boston Symphony Orchestra. Amazing conductor. And when I listened to that, it changed my life. Because it was so free. It was like that schizophrenic part of the artist. Because in a way, sometimes we are not normal. We can be kind of a wave and then we are normal. No, my love? So it can be like from one side to the other, you know. We can be in the lacrimosa of the Mozart Requiem, or we can be in the last movement of Fantastique, you know, where you have that dies irae when it's coming the end of the world, end of life, but then is the joy. I imagine the joy as a drunk man watching, the disaster, the catastrophic end of life, of world. So that is very a contrast. So I'm doing fantastic soon. Thanks to remind me that. And I forgot, in January I'm doing.
That's really, I was just really impressed with Symphony Fantastique, and one of the things that's really amazing about you is your stylistic range. I think that your capacity to conduct very, different composers with, so you have such an incredible range of emotion. And that's something I want to ask you about, because I feel often conductors tend to be very, they're good at Wagner and they're good at this, and you have this capacity to direct, to conduct French music. And so what do you think does that come from? That facility, that ability, that sensitivity.
When you are young, you want to eat the world.
Right.
You don't care.
Right.
But I don't know. I will start telling you, I don't know if in the future I will focus on a specific repertoire. That will be crazy to say, but maybe I will do more. But for example,
what about American music?
I love American music. I'm crazy about John Adams. I do a lot of John Adams music. And look, for example, this last Hollywood Bowl season, we did ballet. I remember in 1 week and a half, I did ballet. I did a Wagner program. I did a musical, the Sondheim on Sondheim. I did, we went to holiday. And when I was driving, I was like, my God, I did all of these things in one moment. I never reflect about that. I never have the chance to take the time and say, like, when I'm planning my schedule, it's like I put everything, and everything looks beautiful. And I enjoy doing these things. But of course, for example, a few weeks ago, I was in Berlin, and I brought Cité Noire by John Adams. It was the very first time that they were doing. And for an European orchestra, it's very difficult sometimes to play this rhythmical music. And it was a challenge for them. And, and it was great, because with the Berlin Philharmonic, you will expect for me to do Bruckner or Brahms or Beethoven.
That's the thing, has all of these experiences with different orchestras actually improved your sensibility to new repertory, because you have here an orchestra that must know the mood you're in when you walk into rehearsal, right? They're so used to working with you, but you go to Berlin, you go to France, they all have such different, Vienna, they all have different qualities. I would love to hear about those different qualities. That's something that's fascinating. When you conduct the French, do you have to be meaner?
How do you know that? He's French. No, look, one of the first orchestras that I conducted as a guest, being very young, was the Radio France Orchestra. And it was love from the beginning. I even did big cycles. We did Berlioz Requiem and Notre Dame. And it was really great. And of course, they have a way to play. I did, in January, the New Year's Eve concert with the Vienna Philharmonic. And you will think, of course, valses, Strauss valses, they play every year. That is easy for them. This is the concert that the Vienna Philharmonic must rehearse. We have around 7 rehearsals, plus a general, plus 1 concert, plus the New Year's Eve concert. Because we were playing like 24 different pieces. But you have to know also, I will explain this technical thing because it's very difficult. In one valse, you have around 6 valses. In one. The Blue Danube? These have like different parts, but every part is a different valse. And for me, was a great experience because it was listening to the tradition. But at the same time, I was talking to the concertmaster. And he told me, the tradition, in a way, we keep, but this tradition of Strauss music, of this dance music, is not anymore in the young musicians, because they are not used now to play in the dance orchestras where we were used to play to get money, because it was not enough. But when you do this music and it's coming this refined sound in Brahms, in Strauss, in Beethoven, it's kind of, wow, you are like swimming in a pool of honey, if I can say. Like when I'm conducting Berlin Philharmonic, it's all about, power. It's about energy. It's about to be in the middle of a hurricane and try to control everything. I feel like Alice in Wonderland.
Right.
The beginning of the. I want to take my. Is that Alice or the no?
Wizard of
it's
Oz.
the Wizard of Oz. I want to take the dog here. It's like, and I love that. And always, I bring that. I share that when I come here to Los Angeles, and I share that with the orchestra here. But when I go also to Berlin, I share my experience here, and I go to Vienna. So I'm a blessed man, because I have to thank life, because I have that opportunity, especially to work with these orchestras that are almost impossible to touch for a young musician.
No, that makes me think. So, is there? I find myself looking to interested in working with very different types of dancers, from different styles. And is there? You probably have an incredible stylistic range and very different people and very diverse orchestra here in Los Angeles. But what are some? Are you sometimes in a country thinking, I want that trombone section, and what if I could put these musicians together, or
My dream orchestra?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, it's my orchestra.
Yeah.
It's my dream orchestra. That in the case of the Philharmonic here in Los Angeles, we have hired like a 60% in my tenure. So I had the chance to bring new people to the orchestra, combined with the people that have the traditions of, because this is an orchestra of tradition. Even if we will become 100 years old, now in 2019, it's an orchestra of lot of traditions. We cannot forget that here was Zubin Mehta, Giulini, Carlo Maria Giulini. He was here. He was a conductor that everybody wanted. And he came to Los Angeles. We have Zapeka Salonen. So it's a place where tradition is very deep. So I think I have a dream orchestra. It's like the Simón Bolívar Symphony Orchestra of Venezuela. It's all my friends from when I was 9 years old. Can you imagine to be doing music with the same people where you were, playing with, where you were behaving, I don't know how to say, doing bad things together as a teenagers and all of that, and now the maestro comes. So it's this kind of, I work with the people that I want to work. I did a beautiful thing. We went to France, well, that is France or Switzerland, Evian. It's this beautiful place from the water.
Of course.
And they have a beautiful festival that Rostropovich created. This beautiful theater in the middle of the woods. And I had an orchestra that I had admired for years, that is the Mahler Chamber Orchestra. It's a chamber orchestra. I don't have the chance a lot to conduct chamber orchestras. But I remember Abbado, when I met him, he invited me he shared concerts with me. Imagine the great Abbado. I was like a teenager, and he said, well, you conduct one concert, I conduct the other one. And I was like, wow. And it was 15 years ago. So now I conducted them. And it was a completely beautiful and unique experience, because it was the chance to go back to this chamber music, small ensemble, and do Beethoven 7. And it was beautiful. So my dream team,
you have.
I think I have the chance to work with them.
When you talk about sensations, physical expression. Space has a lot to do with it. I know that I love going to the Mariinsky in St. Petersburg.
Beautiful.
The sound, the dancers, the proximity.
Yeah.
There are places where I've either performed or seen my ballets where I've had some of the greatest experience. So in terms of the spaces that you've performed and you've conducted in, there's some that are, in terms of sound, and because you were talking about opera and the difficulty with the distance of the singer and
acoustically, that. Well, Disney Hall is one
We're
of
so
the
blessed.
best places in the world to make music. And the flexibility that these places have. We have done opera there. We have done ballet. We do concerts. Acoustically, it's beautiful, the place. So we are blessed to have a place like Disney Hall. I love Amsterdam Concertgebouw, for example. Acoustically, it's a beautiful place. And Musikverein, the Golden Hall in Vienna, is also a place that I love. The Berlin Philharmonic, which Frank Gehry was inspired by, to have all the audience surrounded. And, we have a beautiful hall in Venezuela that we opened a few years ago, like 5 years ago, the Simón Bolívar Hall, that I love to play there. So, in France, in Paris, it's a beautiful place, great
place.
acoustic,
Amazing
Philharmonic,
yes.
beautiful acoustic. So, I love all of these places, but my favorite, Disney Hall.
Disney Hall, good. Yeah, one more. I think you must have a very different experience of the world than I do, or any of us do, by this heightened sense of reality that you have to sound, to perception, the fact that you can conduct these incredibly, I read scores and with great difficulty, but I get through them.
But don't tell me that because you also do all of these great things.
No, but how do you think, for example, I know I spend my life mimicking choreographers and having to understand bodies and dancers. So I know I can walk into a room and understand someone's body language, within immediately.
Yeah.
It's maybe one element for me, but I'm sure for you, you have a different perception than all of us and a different experience of the world. And I'm curious to know, how do you think, your skills translate to your experience on a daily basis into this world?
In which sense?
In the sense that, to sound, to nature, to maybe, just your
wow.
maybe something
that is a deep question.
Yeah.
Because
it might be, in ways that are unconscious, but
yes.
When you walk down the street, can you, hear a sound that, very far? Do you, my wife can spot paparazzis very, very far down there.
Fernando Pessoa, the writer, he was talking about, he has a beautiful poem about, my God, the word contemplate. And we are not used anymore to contemplate, to sit, to take the time, and to just what you said, listen, think, be lost, but be more here. And my beloved wife knows that I get lost very easily. Sometimes she's talking to me and I'm like, and she's like, Gustavo. So I'm in that moment that music sounds inside, words sounds inside, thoughts, a lot of things. And it's a way for me to be in my little room, it's my way to contemplate. And I'm not a crazy man. I don't have even a studio where I sit and I have, special, flavors to sit and put my scores there and do some kind of yoga,
Yeah.
you know, I can be watching television, and I'm with a score, reading, you know,
Right.
reading and a score, and I jump from thing to thing. You see my side of the bed as Maria's one, and it's full of books and scores. So now I have the Wagner Ring Cycle. I'm not
Some light reading.
Yeah, but light, very light. But I will not tell you what I'm reading, because if not, you will think I'm crazy. But you know, I take the score and I read and I listen to the Rheingold, and then I think about that. At the same time, I love Octavio Paz, for example. And for me, when I read Octavio Paz, it's like music. It's art. Time, the concept of time, is so beautiful expressed as in Borges is, you know. And I read that, and then I jump to, I love to read, for example, that is my moments of contemplating, Rousseau, The Confessions. I love that book, because it's the history of this guy, and he gives so much information that sometimes is so crazy, but sometimes it's so rich. And then, at the same time, I'm doing a Mahler symphony, where I found something that is, or in Octavio Paz's book that I was reading, in Mahler's life, and in that moment in the Fifth Symphony, that it combined. And at the same time, I have a bird that is sounding outside. So
your experience of the world is very different than ours.
it's great.
That's expected.
Let me jump now.
Well, we could go on forever talking to you.
You
And
know. He is amazing.
Please,
have you seen his work? He's amazing. So,
But
you are wonderful.
thank
Yeah.
you for.
being here.
I wanted to say one last thing is, I think what's really incredible is the work is always alive when you conduct, is this spontaneity, you know, which you were describing, you know, very well to us, and that is what makes watching you conduct so exciting. So thank you so much. We're so lucky to have you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, my dear.
Thank you.
Please join me in thanking the Sanders family, Benjamin Millepied and Gustavo Dudamel.